Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 3 minutes. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please silence all mobile devices at this time. Thank you. Welcome to Hispanics in Philanthropy 2022 Leadership Conference. Our people, our story. Nuestro Futuro. To kick off our opening plenary, please welcome the 5th presidential inaugural poet in U.S. history and the first ever poet laureate of Miami-Dade County. He is the youngest first Latino immigrant and gay person to serve in such a role. Please give a hip welcome to Richard Blanco.
Buenos dias, everyone. I trust you had enough Cuban coffee and ready to listen to some poetry, yes? It's my distinct honor, privilege, and pleasure to be the one to welcome you all to the conference today. But I want to thank all of you, actually, for welcoming me into your hip family or familia. This year's theme really resonates with me because it's kind of what I strive to do with my own poetry, and that is to tell our stories from an emotional point of view, to be a kind of emotional historian so that we can see our truest selves and thrive, and also so that others can see our true selves. As I like to say, my poems are way smarter than me and never give a Cuban a microphone. So I'll shut up now and share a few poems with you that I hope will capture the spirit of the conference and inspire the important work that we are all called to do. So this is a photo of my mother in Cuba, and this is a photo of my mother with me at the 2013 presidential inauguration. This poem, my mother left her entire, like many stories, left her entire family behind in Cuba, not knowing if she'd ever be able to see them again. And as such, like so many immigrant mothers, I always say that perhaps she's more of an American than I could ever be because of that leap of faith that she took and how much she believed in this country's promises of freedom and justice and her belief in the American dream. And this poem speaks, hopefully, to all of that. Mother country, madre patria. To love a country as if we've lost one. 1968, my mother leaves Cuba for America, a scene I imagine as standing in her place. One foot inside a plane destined for a country she knew only as a name, a color on a map, or glossy photos from drugstore magazines. Her other foot anchored to the platform of her patria, her hand clutched around one suitcase, taking only what she needs most. Hand-colored photographs of her family, her wedding veil, the doorknob of her house, a jar of dirt from her backyard. Goodbye letters she won't open for years. The soul from Joan Vengeance, one last deep breath of familiar air she'll take with her. One last glimpse at all she'd ever known. The palm trees wave goodbye as she steps onto the plane. The mountains shrink from her eyes as she lifts off into another life to love a country. As if we've lost one. I hear her, once upon a time, reading picture books over my shoulder at bedtime, both of us learning English, sounding out words as strange as the talking animals and fair-haired princes in their pages. I taste her first attempts at macaroni and cheese, but with chorizo and peppers. And her shame over Thanksgiving turkeys always dry, but countered by her perfect pork pernil and garlic yuca. I smell the rain of those mornings huddled as one under one umbrella, waiting for the bus to her 10-hour days at the cash register. And at night, the zzz of her sewing her own blouses and quinceañera dresses for her grown nieces, still in Cuba, guessing at their sizes. And the gowns she saw to neighbors to save for a rusty white sedan, no hubcaps, no air conditioning, sweating all the way through our first vacation to Florida theme parks to love a country. As if you've lost one. As if it were you on a plane departing from America forever. Clouds closing like curtains on your country, the last scene in which you're a madman scribbling the names of your favorite flowers, trees, and birds you'd never see again. Your address and phone number you'd never use again. The color of your father's eyes and your mother's hair, terrified you could somehow, someday, forget these, to love a country. As if I was my mother last spring, hobbling, insisting I help her climb all the way up to the U.S. Capitol, as if she were here before you instead of me, explaining her tears, her cheeks pink as the cherry blossoms coloring the air that day, when she stopped, turned to me, and said, "You know, mijo, it isn't where you're born that matters anymore. It's where you choose to die. That's your country." Thank you. So the notion being that, as opposed to dying for one's country, the idea that my mother has realized that this is more her country than Cuba anymore in some ways, because she's lived most of her life here, and that the narrative of her life is so tied to us, to the U.S. In contrast to that portrait, I think we all understand that Hispanics are all too often represented as un-American and unpatriotic and excluded from the American narrative of our country. And of course, nothing could be farther from the truth, and we all know that in this room. And that's what this poem speaks to. It was written in response to El Paso shooting and during National Hispanic Heritage Month, and references the national anthem, or it's a subversion of the national anthem. And this was published nationally in USA Today. The U.S. of us. Oh, say, can you see us? By the dawn of our ancestors' light, still breathing through the cities we forged from the wind of our wills, drenched in the rain of our dusty sweat, and christened for the faith gleaming in our saints' starry eyes, San Francisco, San Antonio, San Diego. Oh, say, when will you have enough faith in us to meet the gleam in our eyes, in your own? When will you see us as one in this one country we all so proudly hail, and tear down the ramparts that divide us from you instead of raising new walls? Oh, say, when will you believe our hands across our hearts, unwavering belief in those broad stripes and bright stars waving in the same sky above our same schools, same churches, the same baseball fields? Oh, say, when will you untranslate us, unitalicize us from the lands and mountains our lives named La Sierra Nevada, La Florida, Montana, Sangre de Cristo, Texas, Nuevo Mexico? When will you recognize the shared words of our sacred and honored history? Say rodeo, say bronco, say patio, say plaza, say bonanza, say canyon, say that you hear our rivers gallantly streaming in Spanish, Rio Colorado, Rio Los Angeles, Rio Grande. When will you stop drowning us, trafficking us like cattle, corralling us in kitchen alleys and musty motel rooms, scarring our children's faces behind striped shadows of iron bars, rebranding our skin as rapists and murderers lurking behind you? When will our immigrant toil and struggling dreams not be ploy for profit? When will you praise us as assets and allies? We will not live our worthy lives in fear and shame. Oh, say, look at us, with the determination in our dirt-creased hands harvesting lettuce, and the firm handshakes of our mayors bestowing keys to their cities, with the silent chopping of onions you don't hear at your restaurant table, and the silence in the eyes of an astronaut eyeing a nationless earth. Oh, say, listen to us, with a snip-snip of gardeners trimming hedges and the rattle of a maracas playing on the radio, with the kind voices of bus drivers wishing us a buenos dias, and the pop voices of singers stirring dance into our bodies, with the riveting of steel piercing cars together, and the beats of poets pounding out lyrics. Oh, say, feel us, with the strength of nannies pushing strollers and park heroes, and the muscle of batters swatting home runs, with prideful tucking of satin hotel sheets and the pride of graduates in satin gowns. Oh, say, then why the bombs of slurs still bursting in the toxic air against us? Why the rocket's red glare of your eyes aimed at us in this needless, perilous fight? Oh, say, let there be proof that the Star-Spangled Banner still waves for us, too. Let the land of the free count us in, too. Let the home of the brave remain our home, too. Thank you. So I'll close on this poem. I think, obviously, as Hispanics in the U.S., we are uniquely diverse, and we all understand this in this room, and yet we have so much in common, right? And this poem takes its inspiration from clouds as a metaphor to examine that complexity and somewhat of that contradiction. The question being, how can we maintain our individual identities and yet still come together as one for our own greater good and the greater good of everyone? And erase those boundaries within us, as well as those boundaries that are placed on us. Cloud Anthem. Until we are clouds that tear like bread but mend like bones. Until we weave into each other like silk sheets shrouding mountains, or bear the gales that shear us. Until we soften our hard edges, free to become any shape we imagine, a rose or an angel crafted like paper mache by breezes, or a lion or a dragon like marble chiseled by gusts. Until we scatter ourselves into pebbles of gray puffs, then band together like stringed pearls. Until we learn to listen to each other, as thunderous as opera or as soft as a showered lullaby. Until we truly treasure the sunset, lavish it in mauve, rust, and rose. Until we have the courage to vanish like sails into the horizon, or be at peace, anchored still. Until we move without any measure, as vast as continents or as petite as islands floating in an abyss of virtual blue we all belong to. Until we dance tango with the moon and comfort the jealous stars falling. Until we care enough for the earth to bless it as morning fog, until we realize we're as muddy as puddles, as pristine as lakes, not yet clouds. Until we remember we're born from rivers and dewdrops. Until we are at ease to dissolve as wispy showers, not always needing to clash like godly yells of thunder, until we believe lightning isn't our right to the ground. Though we can collude into storms that ravage, we can also sprinkle ourselves like memories. Until we tame the riot of our tornadoes, settle down into a soft drizzle, into a daydream. Though we may curse with hail, we can absolve with snowflakes. We can die valiant as rainbows and hold light like blood in our lucid bodies. We can decide to move boundlessly without creed or desire until we are clouds, meshed within clouds, sharing a kingdom with no king, a city with no walls, a country with no name, a nation without any border or claim, until we abide as one, together in one beautiful single sky. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Richard. And now, the Communications Coordinator for the Center for Native American Youth at the Aspen Institute. Please welcome Cheyenne Kippenberger.
Chehentamo, Chohochevke Chayankotum, Yaketeshe Chahochevke Islotum, Anyatlate Kuwathotum, Joe Kippenberger Kun Oshte Kotomlet, Dr. Susan Kippenberger Kun Omwashotum, Seminole Kotomlet, Chilena Kotomlet. Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Cheyenne Susan Kippenberger. Soy la hija de Joe Kippenberger y la hija de Dr. Susan Kippenberger. Soy un miembro de la tribu de los Seminoles de Florida y soy chilena. Good morning, everyone. My English name is Cheyenne Susan Kippenberger. My traditional name, given to me by my grandmother, is Ithet, which means fire. I am a citizen of the Seminole Tribe of Florida, and I am Chilena. I lead communications for the Center for Native American Youth at the Aspen Institute, and I'm honored to be with you all today. I was born here in South Florida and was raised by the culture and traditions that have been passed down from generation to generation in the Everglades and in the deserts of Chile. I am the living embodiment of the strength and resilience of my ancestors who survived the unsurvivable. I am the present and I am the future. May we begin today with recognition and intention. Every community owes its existence to generations from around the world who have contributed their thoughts, prayers, hopes, dreams, and energy to making history that has led us here to this very moment. And we begin this effort today by acknowledging that we are on the ancestral lands of the native nations, including the Taino, the Tequesta, the Calusa, and today, the sovereign unceded homelands of the Seminole Tribe of Florida and the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida. Despite forced removal, relocation, and attempted genocide, we never surrendered, and we are still here today. Please recognize the violence committed on the land beneath us. Recognize the legacies of displacement, migration, and colonial settlement that brings us here today. To genuinely acknowledge the land, we must also go and connect with the land. Go outside and recognize what has been given and shared with us to survive. Let us commit to going beyond performative ways by connecting with each other and our earth in a healing, transformative way. And may we be clear in that acknowledging stolen land and cultural erasure is not progress, but only a small gesture of respect. No matter where you are in this country or in the world, you are on indigenous land. Pero nosotros tenemos una responsabilidad para proteger, Nosotros tenemos una responsabilidad para cuidar y proteger la tierra. Ella es nuestra madre. Bienvenidos a mi patria. Welcome to my homelands. Shana Bashat, gracias, and thank you.
Thank you, Cheyenne. She is paving the way for a new era to democratize philanthropy, a leader in centering Latino voices and leadership. Please welcome the President and CEO of Hispanics in Philanthropy, Ana Maria Arguilagos.
Buenos días. This feels really good. Welcome to Hispanics in Philanthropy 2022 conference. ¿Ve? Woo! There's 400 of us gathered here today in Miami, and I want to start thanking you acknowledging the sacrifices that you have made to get here today. It required planning, lots of safety protocols, more testing, hand sanitizer, and I know lots and lots of patience. So from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you, each and every one of you, for taking a leap of faith and for joining us. In gathering here today, together, todos juntos, we demonstrate the love that we have for one another, the love of our collective corazón, what we call our hip network. And the energy in this room is really beautiful. So muchas gracias. I am full of gratitude to each and every one of you. Grateful to be in community with each and every one of you, and grateful that you are here in person, and we have hundreds of people also joining us virtually. I'm grateful to our board members. Here they are. If you're a board member, raise your hand. I see you, Marco. Yeah. Woo. You guys are the collective force behind our power, and I have such appreciation. I have appreciation for our sponsors who have made it possible for us to come together over the next 3 days, especially our leader-level sponsors, the Knight Foundation, Casey Family Programs, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. We couldn't have done it without them. Shane, that was a powerful land acknowledgement. So grateful and appreciate that you're asking us to move beyond words and into action. The incredible HIP staff, raise your hands. They work miracles. Miracles, 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 nothing short of. So thank you very much, all of them, and please, when you see them, tell them, keep on doing it. I'm grateful to my family. I can't do this without my family. Alexia, she has my back. Many of you know my daughter. Thank you to Alexia. My mom, it's her very first HIP conference, so I know, cool. Finally, in awe of Richard Blanco. Really? He was already booked. He wasn't supposed to be here. And I called and I said, por favor. And so I'm grateful that he said yes, that he was able to share his art this morning. And he really is such a beautiful spirit. So grateful to Richard. And I'm going to share one of his poems as well. I know you heard 3, but I'm going to share my favorite, a little excerpt, because it's my favorite. And you're in Miami, and it reminds me of the ocean and the ocean air. And it's called Some Days the Sea. Someday, I suppose, I'll return someplace like waves trickling through the sand back to sea, without any memory of being. But if I could choose eternity, it would be here, aging with the moon, enduring in this space, between every grain of sand, in the cusp of every wave, and every seashell's hollow. Bonito, ¿verdad? Those words, I love them because they remind me of my papi. My papi was a sailor. He loved sailing, and even more than loving sailing, he loved to teach sailing. So every weekend or whenever he could get us at the beach, he would teach us an appreciation of the waves, the wind, the clouds, everything that's entailed with nature. Also, my long summers walking the shores of Isla Verde, which is where I grew up in Puerto Rico, and here in Miami, the picnics that we would have at El Farolito or Crandon Park Zoo and Key Biscayne. Those of you that are from here remember those picnics. The sea is where I go to recharge and to seek calm, to find the energy that we need, I need, you all need, every day to do this work that we call social justice. It's also the sea that connects us to the spirit of our colorful and diverse communities, touching different shores, at one time forging valleys and canyons by the force of the water flowing through them over time. Some of our most iconic lands were forged in this way. The sea that covers our vast and varied planet To our naked eye, it appears that it's one. Yet, we know because we've studied geography, they are many, right? Similarly, Latinos, we are vast and we are varied. And we too have been forged by constant change. We have seeped into the land after centuries on this soil. Or in the case of our indigenous brothers and sisters, we have been here present over a millennia. And that's especially true here in Florida, where we have both a rich history and a bright future. The waters that touch this land carried so many of our ancestors from faraway shores, many of them brought here forcefully, against their will. And the waters that touch this land, they connect us to the Caribbean, to Central America, to South America. And today, as a former Floridian, I'm going to say that Latinos, Latinx, Hispanics, however you self-identify, we are all deeply rooted in this country, and we are deeply rooted here in Florida. And in the service of our commitment to this beautiful place that we call home, in the face of the bigotry, the hatred, and the homophobia, HIP has chosen to bring our conference here to Miami. And not only are we bringing our conference, but we are also doubling down on building power here in Florida. We are investing in Florida and across the southern states where legislation threatened our vulnerable communities. This week, you're going to get to meet some of our partners in this effort. And I'm excited to be introducing you to folks from We Count, from the Contigo Fund, from FLIC, from MAC, Alapata Collaborative, Hispanic Federation, so many, many more. Together, we're sharing and building resources, and we are celebrating pride, and we're defiantly spreading love. And we call on everyone, ¿verdad? All of you here, and all of you watching virtually, join us because we're not backing down. Backing down is not in our DNA, no? No, no. So I'm excited to be here with you today. In the next year, we're going to be celebrating 4 decades. Here's Diana. She took us through the first 3 decades, and now we're going into our 4th. Right? Collectively, we've built movements, we've built corazón, we've forged new opportunities. We are writing our stories into history and are refusing to let our accomplishments be erased. Next week, the Molina Family Gallery opens in Washington, D.C. That's the down payment on our Smithsonian National Museum of the American Latino. It took 3 decades to get that to be a reality. And it's a huge step, a huge victory, and I feel optimistic. I'm excited. But it's always, life is a two-edged sword, right? There's always light and shadow. So while I feel this optimism, I also feel a threat of a receding tide, trying to drag us backwards at the same time, and it's a palpable attack on Latinos. It's a deprivation of our rights, and it's systemic. It's feeling and fueling gun violence that ravages our communities at disproportionate rates, from Uvalde to Buffalo. This past weekend, it was hard to read the newspaper, reading about Philadelphia, Tulsa, Chattanooga, countless other places across the U.S. I, like many of you, feel profound grief and a profound weight of these innocent lives that have been stolen, children and teachers, grandparents, store clerks, the moms and dads that never got to hug them goodbye. You all know that these attacks, they're physical violence, but they also manifest in spiritual violence, or as many of us call it, the murder of a spirit. We also feel it in the legislative attacks on our LGBTQ plus community, in the suppression of voting rights. And any day now, I was scared it was going to be this morning, an official ruling from the US Supreme Court that could strip our essential right to reproductive health care. There's extreme polarization. It's straining not only the US, but democracies across the whole Americas. And the reality is on so many fronts, the generation coming of age now is poised to have far fewer rights and protections than the ones that came before it. That's a future we cannot accept, and we refuse to turn back. So I'm looking forward to the future because we have you all. We have our HIP líderes, which, as many of you know, is our mid-career leadership fellow, and just last week we graduated our 6th class, which means we have over 200 líderes that are building connections and making change on a global scale. Every week they bring us amazing ideas. Just this week, yesterday, Jose Alfaro, is Jose here? Whoop, raise your hand. Yeah, Jose is there. He's with Every Town for Gun Safety. He's a brand new leader, and he's not even started yet. And he's saying, Ana Mari, let's work on gun violence. So we're announcing a partnership with Jose, and we're announcing partnerships every week with many of our leaders. Why don't you all stand up real quick? I know I'm running out of time, but it's really important to say it. Yeah. HIP also invests in long-term solutions, and right now, parallel to what we're doing today here, we have Inicio Ventures working with Google.org, working on our very first summit, bringing together entrepreneurs and founders because we're working to build assets, supporting Latino entrepreneurship, and investing in ourselves. The goal here is we're building our own wealth. We're building our own philanthropists. So that's happening. We're telling our own stories, and that allows us to take action, because defining who we are is central to determining what we will become. Right? We have to do it ourselves because the government won't do it. Take the US Census. We were undercounted this census 2020 at a rate 3 times higher than we were in 2010, just a decade ago. And so they're shutting us out. They're shutting us out of funding, out of political power, out of the narrative. That's why we have to be defiant, because we know that we make up 1/5 of this total population in the US. And as we're shut out of funding and the government resources, the ugly truth is that we're also shut out of philanthropic dollars. And many of you know this. I was telling my daughter my speech last night, and she's like, Mom, you say this all the time. And I was like, yep, honey, I gotta say it all the time. The ugly truth is that 1% of philanthropic dollars is what goes to our Latino community. And that number has not changed in over 40 years since HIP started. So that's just not okay. We must receive more. We must receive our fair share of government and philanthropic dollars. And we also need to work on different strategies. That's why we're working on Inicio. That's why we're working on building our wealth, because we want to leverage these dollars with our own dollars. We want to build up our assets with our own gente and generate our own wealth, because we know that our values are generosity. That's fundamental to our sense of family and community, and it's inextricable to who we are. So, I want to leave you with a thought. By reclaiming our words, by reclaiming our stories, and proclaiming our contributions, we remind the world of our presence, of our collective power. And that's like the wind and the water. We also are flowing and carving out our own future. As we approach 40 years of HIP and look ahead, let's all together, juntos, hold philanthropy accountable. Let's push for a 10-fold increase in funding to our communities, recognizing the accountability we have to each other, we have to philanthropy, and to the world. We know that philanthropy is here, in this room. It's all of us. We have always been philanthropy, and we're not going anywhere. In fact, it's the institutional philanthropic practices that I offer are the ones that are in need of a makeover. So, as we come together across sectors and generations, let's rewrite the way that things are done and rewrite our own stories together so that we can get to Nuestro Futuro, the theme of our conference. Let's give ourselves permission to dream of what's to come, because we know our numbers are growing and our voices must match our numbers, and we must never be counted out again. We will stay, invest here in Florida, and wherever our communities need us most, and we will persist, enduring as the sea, and strong together to turn the tides. So, muchas gracias.
Gracias, Ana Mari. He is the visionary guiding HIP's expansive and diverse philanthropy footprint. Please welcome Hispanics in Philanthropy's board chair, the Vice President of Public Policy and Civic Engagement at the California Community Foundation, Efraín Escobedo.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here. And Ana Mari, just fantastic job, as always, leading with vision, but more importantly, what attracts all of us to the organization is leading with values and action. And so we're very humbled and excited to have you all here, both physically present, but also acknowledging that we're across the country at this moment. We've got folks also joining us virtually. So for those of you making time to join us virtually, welcome. Bring your energy, we feel you, and we're excited for what we're about to kick off. I want to also thank Cheyenne for gracing us and welcoming us to Seminole Nation. I think it's an honor to be here, to have that welcome and remind us of the solidarity we have with all peoples that unfortunately continue to suffer multi-generational violence. And as Ana Mari enumerated on those specifics, let's just be reminded that violence is the underlying root problem here. Not just violence out of a weapon, but violence from our judicial branch, from our legislative branches, from our military branches, violence that has bred racism, genocide, colonization. It's at the root. That violence in the DNA is the thing that needs to get rooted out. And so today we heard a lot about, this morning from Ana Mari, where we are with that. And I'm always about, well, what are we going to do about it? And when you look across this room, we see all of the different areas where power is being built. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me, even though you're eating, and just raise your hand if you're here involved with philanthropy. From a foundation, everything. Okay. Raise your hand if you're here involved with a community-based organization, whether advocacy, grassroots, okay? Writers, academia, right? All the affiliations. We could start getting into the intersectionalities, LGBTQ plus communities, immigrant communities, building black power in our communities. And so we need to do something about that, right? So I'm going to do something to kick us off and jump into our program. And I'm going to say, we need to, in these moments and what we're faced with, realize that as you saw the different sectors here, we are in a different position than we were 30 years ago. Because we're in these different spheres. But we need to realize and collectivize our power as well. So I originally, growing up politically, was trained as an organizer. And you always need a good chant to fire people up, right? All right, so we're going to create one here on the fly, and I'm going to walk you through it. You can do it. Even philanthropy can do it, right? We'll walk you guys through it. So I'm going to say, who's got the power? And your response is going to be, community's got the power. Then we're going to build on it, and I'm going to say, who can support that power? And we're going to say, HIP can support that power. And then we're going to close with, who wields the power? And we all will chime in and say, we wield the power. All right? You guys ready? You guys are on Zoom and people are seeing across the country. If you're virtually, join in, but you guys need to step it up. So who's got the power? Community's got the power. Who can support the power? HIP. can support the power? Who wields the power? We wield the power. Let's go. All right. Well, it's been an honor these past few years to serve on the HIP board. And service on the HIP board is about commitment, it's about familia, and it's about just bringing what you have to the table to build that collective corazón that we talk about at HIP. And we have 2 individuals this year who are concluding their service on the board. They've given 6 years of tireless effort and commitment to the organization, and we are here today because of their collective efforts and contributions to the organizations. They're innumerable, whether it's bringing in communications and strategy chops, bringing in corporate strategy chops, it all makes us better. And so to honor these 2 individuals, we have some beautiful service awards that we'll be handing out. And so I want to invite Roy Cosme and Jennifer Chavez Rubio up to the stage. Yes. All right, come on up. Right, Brenda. So first, Roy, if you could come over to Brenda and accept this. On behalf of HIP and the board, Roy, thank you so very much for your contributions. And Jennifer, on behalf of the board, thank you so very much as well for all of your time and commitment. And we know that this is not goodbye. It's simply a way to hook you and keep you working for the board. So every time you look at that award, remember, what have I done for HIP lately? All right, good. Good. Thank you both. All right, and now looking to the future, you all should have at the top of your email inboxes received a ballot for this year's slate of both new board members and also re-election of board members. This is a member-driven organization, and so it's your vote that brings folks. Thank you all for making amazing nominations and continuing to strengthen HIP's future. So we have a slide for you all with the nominees, and just want to quickly share who you'll see on your ballot. We have Cecilia Garza, who's Director of Donor Initiatives and the President's Fund at Wellspring Philanthropic Fund. Eli Vasquez, who is the founder and CEO of Capital Stack Investors and founder and managing partner of Investors of Color. Maribel Cifuentes, who's a portfolio director at the Colorado Health Foundation. Manuel Santamaria, California people in the house, who is Vice President of Community Action at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and Miri Aponte, Chief Experience Officer with Spitfire Strategies. Yes, let's hear it. Then we have a set of directors who are eligible for re-election and are being presented to you all as members for re-election. First, Sean Escoffrey, who's Executive Director of the Roy and Patricia Disney Family Foundation. Christine Switzer, Vice President, Philanthropic Strategies for Fidelity Charitable. Hector Mujica, our Regional Manager at Google.org. Sam Zamaripa, Chairman and Director of Mundo Hispánico, and Hilda Polanco, Managing Partner at BDO FMA. These are our directors up for re-election. We ask for your support and thank them for continuing to be interested in supporting. If you're a voting member, check your email. You have till June 21st to cast your vote. You don't vote on the individuals, you vote on the entire slate, an up or down vote. But it's important that we have good turnout and that you all participate in that. If you are not a member of HIP, you will be asking yourself why throughout this whole conference, and we encourage you to become one, whether you're new to philanthropy or to your organization. There are so many benefits to joining the HIP familia and becoming part of our collective corazón. So we encourage you, all our board members and staff are here. If you have questions about getting engaged with HIP throughout the conference, just tap us on the shoulder, engage us. We're happy to bring you into the familia. So with that, I will tell you thank you again for being here, and enjoy the conference.
To begin our lunch program, please welcome today's host, the Director of Strategic Partnerships for HIP, Brenda Vaden.
Buenas tardes, everyone. Hello. I did not know Efrain was going to lead a chant, and now I feel the pressure, but that is not my forte, so thank you, Efrain, for all your incredible work as our chair. So it is so good to see all of your beautiful faces here in beautiful Miami. We are so grateful that you all joined us. Earlier, my colleagues in our team meeting said, wow, todos se ven bien chulos. I was like, I know, everyone looks so gorgeous. And I'm sure those at home, I'm sure you look amazing as well. Thank you for being here. Now, as you have already noticed, many of you, HIP is announcing a few amazing things this month. Next year, HIP will be celebrating its 40th anniversary. Founded by 3 Latinxes in the Bay Area in 1983, HIP was born as an affinity group to raise awareness about issues that impact Latinx communities within the philanthropic sector. Over the decades, HIP has not only connected large funders with smaller Latinx-focused nonprofits worldwide, but has become the powerhouse that informs, that represents the interests of our communities among global nonprofits, funders, philanthropists, impact investors, and the public sector. Over the next year and a half, HIP is going to shed light on the extraordinary accomplishments to date and set the tone for the work ahead. Please come talk to me, Ana Mari, or any of our amazing leadership team on how you can collaborate with HIP. You may also notice that HIP has a brand new look and a brand new bilingual website. And we've moved. So we are now at hipfunds with an S, .org. And y'all, it is stunning. It is so stunning. I'm obsessed with it. Our comms team is incredible. It's so stunning that I want you to take a peek right now. So if you want to take out your phone and go to hipfunds.org, check it out. I am aware I kind of matched the website today. That was not intentional, but it's such a vibrant and gorgeous and functional website. Please visit. While you're there, you can see that the new website showcases each of our programs. It highlights our grantees and has a blog section broken out by themes, all of which makes it easier for all of you to learn how to work with us and join us. And now, if you know HIP well, as many of you do here, you know that our staff is always ready to take it to the next level. It's why HIP Give, our bilingual digital giving platform that makes it possible to mobilize resources for social impact projects throughout the Americas, has launched a new digital giving circle platform where any organization or group that has a giving circle can now join the platform to help gather funds for their causes. Our HIP Give team has a booth here at the conference, so make sure you stop by and learn more how to get involved. And now that I've shared how amazing HIP is, a few housekeeping items, and then continue enjoying your lunch. If you, like myself, enjoyed the words of Richard Blanco, make sure to stop by at his book signing later this afternoon at 5 p.m., just outside the ballroom here that we're in. He'll be joined by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Ada Ferrer and our very own Diana Campoamor. We are so grateful to Cristina from the, and Richard, yes. Thank you, Ana Mari. We are so grateful to Cristina from the local bookstore, Books and Books, who has made it possible for copies of their books to be available for purchase today. Please refer to the CVent app and our daily HIP conference newsletter for what to expect for the days ahead. Head to the registration desk if you need any help with this. And if you have not already done so, please visit our hipconference.org to review our COVID safety protocols. We've made self-testing kits available for everyone at the registration desk. And lastly, this week is all about connecting and being in community. It's about building culture and strategies together. We are excited to bring you great leaders and conversations at the intersection and forefront of the issues that impact our communities in the Americas. It's why we're looking forward to our plenary conversation with foundation presidents right here in this ballroom. And now, lunch will be continued to be served, and while you're eating, please enjoy the music of New York singer, songwriter, actress, and model, Giselle Cuestas. Buen provecho.
And now, lunch will be served, so please enjoy your meal, and we will resume our program shortly. While you are eating, enjoy the music of New York singer, songwriter, actress, and model, Giselle Cuestas. Buen provecho.
Hi everybody, my name is Giselle. I'm so excited to be here today. I hope you guys enjoy your meal. I will be starting us off with a song called Something's Got a Hold on Me. Something's got a hold on me, yeah. Oh, something's got a hold on me right now, child. Let me tell you now, I got a feeling I feel so strange. Everything about me seems to have changed. Step by step, I got a brand new walk. I even sound slow when I talk. I said, oh, oh. Oh, I said, baby, it must be love. Let me tell you now, something's got a hold on me, yeah. Oh, something's got a hold on me right now, child. Let me tell you now, I never felt like this before. Something's got a hold on me, I won't let go. Believe I'd die if I only could. I sure feel strange, but I sure feel good. I say, oh, 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 oh. I say, baby, it must be love. Let me tell you now, it must be for. Something's got a hold on me, I won't let go. Believe I'd die if I only could. I sure feel strange, but I sure feel good. I say, oh, 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 baby, it must be love. My heart feels heavy, my feet feel light. I shake all over, but I feel alright. I never felt like this before. Something's got a hold on me, I won't let go. I never thought it could happen to me. Got me living on my misery. I never thought it could be this way. Love so good, I put it on me. I said, oh, oh. Oh, say Thank you. Thank you so much. That was Something's Got a Hold on Me. I was just gonna ask, can I have the music louder? Because I can't really hear it. Thank you. So this next song is called Alive. It's one of my favorite songs right now, so I'm really excited to sing it for you guys today. That's good. I've had ghosts of my past come back to greet me, big red smiles in your eyes. I go blind looking back, pray they can't see me, pray they let me be, 'cause I can't outrun, outsmart, outlive myself, oh, outrun, outsmart my shadow. I wish I'd learned to take heed of all the signs. I wish I could turn back the hands of on in time. It's the science of truth, seen it with my own brown eyes. If you play with fire, you'll get burned alive. Oh, oh, oh. I wish I could have known the way fate would use me, take my life in her hands. The things she'd do to me, yeah, I'd never complain. I'd always go through it, the pain's a part of the play. 'Cause I can't outrun, outsmart, outlive myself, oh, outrun, outsmart my shadow. I wish I'd learned to take heed of all the signs. I wish I could turn back the hands of on in time. It's the science of truth, seen it with my own brown eyes. If you play with fire, you'll get burned alive. Oh, no regrets, no lessons learned. This is all that we get, and it's just how it goes. The good and bad, it takes its toll before we get old. I wish I'd learned to take heed of all the signs. I wish I could turn back the hands of on in time. It's the science of truth, seen it with my own brown eyes. If you play with fire, you get burned Thank you. Thank you. So this next song is called Sparkle by Diana Ross. Sparkle back in my smile. You made me wanna walk 1,000 miles. You let me know that it's so, and everything is real, everything is real. No, 1,000 miles. You let me know that it's so, and everything must live, everything must breathe. Now you say you must leave. Just the other day, you seem so content. It's a joke. You thought it up on the spur of the moment. Please ease my mind. Come on, set it right. 'Cause if you don't, I won't sleep a wink tonight. You put the sparkle back in my smile. You made me wanna walk 1,000 miles. You let me know that it's so, and everything must live, everything must breathe. Now you say you must leave. Just the other day, you seem so content. Oh, oh, oh. You put the sparkle back in my smile. Oh, everything, oh, everything, oh, everything. Everything must breathe. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this next song is called Jealous by Labyrinth. It's kind of a slow song, but I'm very excited to sing this one. Thank you. I'm jealous of the rain that falls upon your skin. It's closer than my hands have been. Oh, I'm jealous of the rain. I'm jealous of the wind that ripples through your clothes. It's closer than your shadow. Oh, I'm jealous of you. And I wished you the best of all this world could give. And I told you when you left me there's nothing to forgive. 'Cause I always thought you'd come back and tell me all you found was heartbreak and misery. It's hard for me to say I'm jealous of the way you're happy without me. I'm jealous of the nights that I don't spend with you. I'm wondering who you lay next to. Oh, I'm jealous of the nights. I'm jealous of the love that wasn't here, that's gone for someone else to share. Oh, I'm jealous of the love. And I wished you the best of all this world could give. And I told you when you left me, there's nothing to forgive. 'Cause I always thought you'd come back and tell me all you found was heartbreak and misery. It's hard for me to say I'm jealous of the way you're happy without me. As I sink in the sand, watch you slip through my hands. Oh, as I die here another day. 'Cause all I do is cry behind this smile. I wished you the best of all this world could give. And I told you when you left me, there's nothing to forgive. 'Cause I always thought you'd come back and tell me all you found was heartbreak and misery. It's hard for me to say I'm jealous of the way you're happy without me. It's hard for me to say I'm jealous of the way you're happy without me. That was jealous. Thank you. Okay, so this next song is in Spanish, which I'm really excited to sing. It's called Por Siempre Tú. Cuando estoy por caer, yo sé que tu amor me volverá a socorrer. Venceré el temor. sepa que tú sientes dentro lo mismo que yo. Y en el dolor y el viento me supiste amar. Y lo que soy es por ti sin dudar. Eres mi protección, mi sostén, frente a todo mi mejor opción. Por siempre tú, mi poder, mi valor, a través de lo peor. Mi luz, mi cielo azul, mi gran amor aún, por siempre tú. Oh, oh. No hay ningún amanecer que no me despierte sin saber que te soñé. Soy por ti muy feliz. En mi alma para siempre hay un sitio para ti. No importa dónde esté, tu amor me encontrará, iluminando mi ser, mi oscuridad. Protección, mi sostén, frente a todo mi mejor opción. Por siempre tú, mi poder, mi valor, a través de lo peor. Mi gran amor aún, por siempre tú. Mi guardián será refugio de tu querer, la fe que me hará creer que vale mi vida, un hogar al cual por siempre volveré. Te amo por siempre tú, solo tú. Opción, por siempre tú, mi poder, mi valor, a través de lo peor. Mi luz, mi cielo azul, mi gran amor aún. Mi luz, mi cielo azul, mi gran amor aún, por siempre tú.
Okay, so this next one is also in Spanish, and it's by one of my idols. I'm sure you guys know this song. It is Si Una Vez by Selena.
Yo te di todo mi amor y más, y tú ni reconoces ni lo que es amar. Yo me puse dispuesta a tus pies y tan solo con desprecio más puedo, pero una vez. Si una vez dije que te amaba, hoy me arrepiento. Si una vez dije que te amaba, no sé lo que pensé, estaba loca. Si una vez dije que te amaba y que por ti la vida daba.
Si una vez dije que te amaba, no lo vuelvo a hacer. Ese error es cosa de ayer. Yo sé que un día tú volverás y tú de todo te arrepentirás. Yo me puse dispuesta a tus pies y tan solo con desprecio me has podido perdonar. Si una vez dije que te amaba, hoy me arrepiento. Si una vez dije que te amaba, no sé lo que pensé, estaba loca. Si una vez dije que te amaba y que por ti la vida daba. Si una vez dije que te amaba, no lo vuelvo a hacer. Ese error es cosa de ayer. Si una vez dije que te amaba y que por ti la vida daba. Si una vez dije que te amaba, no lo vuelvo a hacer. Ese error es cosa de ayer. Okay, so this next song is called Stand Up for Love, and it means a lot to me. It's one of the first songs I ever got to record, and it's just about believing that if we all try really hard and believe, we can see a change in the world, and that's something that I really hope to see one day. So this is Stand Up for Love by Destiny's Child. There are times I find it hard to sleep at night. We are living through such troubled times, and every child that reaches out for someone to hold for one moment, they become my own. And how can I pretend that I don't know what's going on when every second and every minute another soul is gone? And I believe that in my life I will see, oh yeah, an end to hopelessness of giving up, of suffering. If we all stand together this one time, then no one will get left behind. And stand up for life, stand up and hear me sing, stand up for love. I'm inspired and hopeful each and every day. That's how I know that things are gonna change. And how can I pretend that I don't know what's going on
when every second and every minute another soul is gone. And I believe that in my life I will see, oh yeah, an end to hopelessness of giving up, of suffering. If we all stand together this one time, then no one will get left behind, and stand up for life, stand up for love. And it all starts right here, and it starts right now. One person stands a man, and the rest will follow. For all the forgotten, for all the unloved, I'm gonna sing this song. I believe that in my life I will see, oh yeah, an end to hopelessness of giving up, of suffering. If we all stand together this one time, then no one will get left behind, and stand up for life, stand up and hear me sing, stand up for love.
All right. Thank you. To finish us off, I wanted to sing a song that I'm sure many of you know. This is by a beloved artist. Her name is Gloria Estefan. And this song is about just missing your land and feeling like you want to stay true to your heritage. And as an immigrant, that's something that I really relate to, and I'm sure many of you do as well. So this is called Mi Tierra by Gloria Estefan.
De mi tierra bella, de mi tierra santa, oye ese grito de los tambores y los timbales algún manchar. Ese pregón que cantó un hermano, que de su tierra vive lejano y que recuerdo le hace llorar. Esa canción que sigue entonando de su dolor, de su propio llanto, y se le escucha penar. La tierra te duele, la tierra te da en medio del alma cuando tú no estás. La tierra te empuja de raíz y cara. La tierra suspira si no te ve más. La tierra donde naciste no la puedes olvidar, porque tiene tus raíces y lo que dejas atrás. La tierra te duele, la tierra te da en medio del alma cuando tú no estás. Siguen los pregones, la melancolía, y cada noche junto a la luna sigue el guajiro entonando el son. Y cada calle que va a mi pueblo tiene un quejido, tiene un lamento, tiene nostalgia como su voz. Esa canción que sigue entonando de su dolor, de su propio llanto, con más fuerza al corazón. La tierra te duele, la tierra te da en medio del alma cuando tú no estás. La tierra te empuja de raíz y cal. La tierra suspira si no te ve más. voz y grito, vive el recuerdo, corre en mi sangre, la llevo por dentro como no, canto de mi tierra bella y santa, sufre ese dolor que hay en su alma, aunque esté lejos yo la siento, y un día regreso, yo lo sé. Siguen los pregones, la melancolía, y cada noche junto a la luna sigue el guajiro entonando el sol, y cada calle que va a mi pueblo tiene un quejido, tiene un lamento, la nostalgia de su voz corre con fuerza al corazón, la tierra te duele, la tierra te da en medio del alma cuando tú no estás. La tierra te empuja de raíz y cal. La tierra suspira si no te ve más. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Giselle. To begin HIP's afternoon plenary, Nuestro Futuro, a conversation with foundation presidents, please welcome the president and CEO of the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta and today's moderator, Frank Fernandez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the opening plenary for this year's HIP conference, Nuestro Futuro. Bienvenidos a Miami. I am very excited to be moderating today's session because not only am I a Miami native and need help with my lav, I also used to sneak into that fancy pool across the street when I was in high school here, so I'm glad to be here and staying at this hotel. But all kidding aside, I'm happy to be moderating this session because we're going to be hearing about the latest strategic and cultural trends in philanthropy from our colleagues and leaders in the field. So at today's session, we're going to focus on three things. The first is to really look at the last 2.5 years and what trends we have seen in that time, how they have affected our industry and our organizations. Second, we're going to look forward and look at what are the things coming down the road in terms of philanthropy that we need to be evolving to or thinking about. And lastly, we're going to be talking about us, the Latinx community, in terms of what are the impacts of that for both the communities we serve, as well as all the work and everyone in this room and the work we do every day. So personally, I think this session is critically important because as someone who's relatively new to philanthropy, I came to this industry about 8 years ago. I was in the nonprofit sector before that for a long time. For me, I thought this then, and I think this even more now, philanthropy in many ways is broken. Philanthropy, by and large, is a function of inequity. This is an irony of our industry that we have to reckon with. We are here, we exist because inequities exist, because of concentration of capital and wealth inequality. And it is what it is. So what do we do about it? If you're in this room, you are part of this system. You're part of the foundation world. So how do we reduce the injustice of an unjust system while dismantling reforming and evolving this same system into a more just one? Or for those of us in the Deep South, because I'm in Atlanta, how do we center and move philanthropy away from this idea of charity to giving back, to this idea of a shared destiny? And for everyone here, Latino, Latinx, Latina, philanthropic professionals, how do we lift up and prioritize our community, whose needs are acute, real, and pressing, while at the same time continuing to lift up our black communities and our black colleagues, because their needs are real and acute and pressing? How do we move away from an either or to a both and? How do we talk about the intersection of these communities? I have lots of questions, not a lot of easy answers, but fortunately, the folks behind the Wizard of Oz here is going to come out. Our panelists say they have all the answers. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from them the answers to many of these questions. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. First, we have the president of the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, Cherise West Schattleberry. The president of the Certain Foundation, Don Chen. And the president of the Woods Fund Chicago, Michelle Morales. All right, I'm going to take a seat now, but what I'm going to do to get us started is I'm going to ask our panelists, rather than me reading their bios and making them uncomfortable because I say nice things about them, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And I'm going to put them on the spot a little bit. I'm going to ask them to share something with us that we couldn't find out from our friend Google. So, Cherise.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for this invitation and to be a part of this, this panel and this wonderful gathering. My name is Cherise West Scantleberry. I am president and CEO of the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. We are headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we do our grant making in the entire state of Arkansas in the areas of economic, educational, and racial equity. What you may not know from Google, I always hate those icebreakers because I'm like, you know, I'm not that interesting, I have no idea. I have no idea.
All right, we're going to come back. Yeah. We're going to come back to her. Don.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Chen, president of the Certain Foundation. I've been at Certain since 2018. I've been in the philanthropy sector for, I think, 14 years now, which is mind-boggling. And before that, I worked at nonprofits working on environmental justice, affordable housing, and urban planning. And what you might not know about me from Google is that I have 3 daughters, and who, you know, used to be little girls, and now they're all strong, beautiful women.
Everybody, I'm Michelle Morales, president of Woods Fund Chicago. As the name suggests, we're a place-based foundation. We do all of our funding in Chicago. We fund community-based organizing and public policy advocacy with a racial justice lens. You can probably find this on Google, but it's not in my bio, so I'm going to say it. So I'm a first-generation U.S.-born Puerto Rican with parents migrating to the U.S. from Guayama and Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. I'm a stepmother to 2 amazing adults and a mother to a son who just graduated high school, so we're super happy. If you're friends with me on Facebook, they saw all the pictures plastered on Facebook. I've been at Woods Fund since November 2019, and prior to Woods Fund, I had the privilege of co-coordinating an international campaign to demand the release of Puerto Rican political prisoners held in prisons throughout the United States. So thank you.
All right, we're going to get started. We're going to go through a series of questions we're going to ask all our panelists to respond to, but we're going to have time at the end for Q&A from the crowd. And so there are going to be folks walking around with hopefully you have at your table index cards. You can go ahead and write your card down and put it up. Someone will pick it up so we can go ahead and make sure to ask your questions as well. So we'll start with a question just about external events. A lot has happened, obviously, in the last 2.5 years. And whether it's the pandemic, whether this racial reckoning moment we're in, or everything that's happening now with respect to potentially losing some of our civil and human rights. And so the question I have for all of you is, how are you responding? So we'll come back to you with your special Google moment, but Michelle,
we're gonna go
go
down
ahead.
there. So how we're responding, I think at the Woods Fund, we're, instead of being issue focused, we're looking more at how do we support the social justice ecosystem in Chicago to strengthen it so that it's sustained for the long haul. I think for us, we know that these issues are not going to go away through our corpus of 65 million. And so instead, what we would rather do is ensure that the activists and the organizers and the infrastructure in Chicago can withstand these attacks, can hopefully increase the quality of life for those folks and strengthen the ecosystem so that you don't see as much turnover as we've been seeing ever since the onset of the pandemic.
So I'll go next. At the Certain Foundation, right as I was entering the foundation, we decided to center racial justice in our mission. We'd been a social justice foundation for many years, and in the lead up to 2018, my arrival, the foundation decided to really put racial justice at the center. So we didn't really pivot our mission. Our mission was good, and I saw to it to really just double down on all of our work, really focus on implementation, and not just in our grant making, but also in our operations. So 3 major things. Number 1, we increased spending by about 35%, which is the first time the foundation has ever done an increase over the 5% that foundations have to follow. The second thing was to really lean into all the trust-based practices. We recognize that to do our work well, we really have to listen. We have to, basically take a lot of leadership and a lot of advice and direction from people who are in communities on the ground, knowing what's going on. We're trying to make things better at the community level, and so that was really critically important for us. And the third thing was really to elevate our voices. We have platforms, and we're able to speak and write and just, use our powers of persuasion to try to advance the goals of racial justice and respond to the needs of the pandemic. So we did those 3 things.
So I want to dig in a little bit to what you said earlier. You said you went from social justice to racial justice. And as we know, words matter, language matters. And that little change, I'm sure, wasn't just a little change. So I'd love to hear, because I know, can you not hear us? No, we can't. Oh. Nope. We'll go higher then. So, no?
I don't think it's Mike's.
How about now?
Want to use my mic?
I'm just going to have to go up there. Okay now? Yeah. All right. So if you didn't hear me, I was just asking, I wanted Dawn to talk a little bit more about the shift from social justice to racial justice, because words matter, language matters. And a lot of times we kind of skirt around the edges, and the last 2 years, if anything, has forced us to actually say the thing. So, but that's not easy. I've gone through that same thing with our board. So I'd just love to hear a little bit about that process for you all.
Sure. The way I describe it to folks and the way I understood it as I was coming in is that, it's not so much a shift from social justice to racial justice, it's more putting racial justice at the center of social justice. My view is that you can't work on social justice, equity, any of those issues without putting race at the center in the United States. And so that's what we've really emphasized in the work that we do, and we try to bake it into, like I said, not just our grant making, but also within our operations internally. And it was a big debate. It probably took a couple years to really figure out how we would do this, to work with the board, staff. There's some people who are from our staff here and some former colleagues from CERDNA who went through that process, and it took some patience and also a shared commitment to really trying to do the best by America's communities and people.
And for us, we have had prior to 2018, made this shift or transition to equity. We also were focused on social justice to equity. And if you ask what does that mean or what do the words mean, it is centering or understanding that root causes of the challenges in Arkansas are mainly systemic and want to disrupt systems in Arkansas. And so we in our grant making, focus on systems disruption. And that's how we've made that pivot to what we call our Equity 2025. In terms of our grant making or how we do business, it hasn't changed or shifted a whole lot because we were already doing core support. technical assistance. We'd already looked prior to 2018 at reducing paperwork to get a grant and reporting and the like. But to me, that's the least you could do. Like you should be doing that anyway. Course support, all the rest, right? And so when I hear colleagues talk about that shift, I'm like, well, you so 2008, you know what I mean? Like really, right? We should have been in that direction. So it bothers me still that we talk about, or for some of us, that course support is like a big deal. And it's like, that's what we should be funding anyway, versus project support. You know, supporting TA, listening to grantees and the like, it has been a practice at WRF. And when I hear colleagues talk about them making this shift today, it's bizarre to me. And then you have some people shifting back to all that paperwork and rules and the like. I actually was in a conversation recently where a grantee was seeking from another colleague, and they were talking about how they were putting back things. And I was like, why put it back? Keep it away, like it's unnecessary. And so self-imposed. The IRS doesn't even require half of what we do. So why is it there in the first place?
So one theme I'm hearing from you is like, one of the things that at least I've seen from the pandemic is that it made a lot more people open to change that would historically not have been open to. Is how do you make that sticky and don't let people kind of backslash to the way things were and how you do that? Well, so let's pivot from there to another question is, all right, let's start thinking about the future. Start thinking about, okay, what needs to happen over the next 3 to 5 years for us to be able to have more impact, right? To be able to kind of break through a lot of the political polarization and morass we are in now. So what would you say for your organization, for the sector, are those changes that we need to make?
So I want to ask hip to hip. That is holler and holler loudly, instigate for change and not charity, and use the power in your position. So that's holler, instigate, power, and position. So by holler, what I mean is that there is an invisibility, both within philanthropy and in community, of our Hispanic, Latinx, again, in terms of terms. And for that invisibility to not be invisible, you actually got to holler. You actually have to have voice. You have to exercise your voice. And I know for some, I say holler, and that makes you feel uncomfortable, right? But anything around ableism, civil rights, women's rights, any rights, nobody sat in their chair and politely asked for a darn thing. You gotta make noise, you gotta holler. And that's both within our positions and in our organizations, and I know that's easier said than done, and in community. At board meetings, we have a couple board members who every board meeting are like, well, what about the Latinx? What about the Latinx? What about the Latinx? And for me, it's there, we are committed. But we also have to go out and find them because they're not coming to us. But that's our job. Our job is to find them and not have them come to us. Not everybody in this room believes that's your job, but it is your job to find them and not have them come to us. We have to instigate for change and not just charity. At least in my region, and I can speak from Philanthropy Southeast, been there a long time. Actually, this is my quinceañera year at WRF. Close to 25 in philanthropy overall. And what I do know is that we still have colleagues who want to give $2 for a whole lot of work and want to fund feel-good things and not change. At the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, and I want to put Rose on the spot and her colleagues, because we funded, as an example of change, for 6 years we invested in organizations that Rosa worked with and coalitions for 6 years for what is now in-state tuition for DACA students. That change process included research, it included advocacy, it included general support, it included all the things that it takes for 6 years to get there. It ain't one and done. It's not one grant, you get a result. Yeah. And to make that commitment means you're making a commitment to change. I have nothing against cute backpack programs and food banks. I got nothing against them. But for change to happen in community, you have to invest in transformational systemic change. And we have to push our institutions that want to feel good and say that they funded some Latinos with some cute programs, let them do that and fund systemic change. And then power and position. So when we had the civil unrest and with George Floyd in 2020, and if I got that year wrong, don't correct me because COVID, all the years run together. When we had that civil unrest, the governor called upon WRF and some others to organize groups and have these conversations. It resulted in Rosa being put on a governor's task force. And once and we thought, oh wow, like he actually put a for real advocate on his task force. Not a fake advocate, but a for real advocate, right? With some voice power behind her and the like. Well, once he found out he put a for real advocate on the task force, he kicked her off the task force. I called Rosa and her colleagues and I said, then we're gonna create a shadow task force. And we have a task force in which that task force that's doing that work is fine, but let's fund the research and offer policy proposals and positions that come from our coalition. It's named the Black and Brown Power Coalition. Like, you know, how do we do that? So that's using power and position. In that, I made that phone call and said, hey, you know, this is what we need to do. And my team, David and others on my team, worked with Think Rubrics and others, pulled it together, and we did the grant, and they're still working, and in fact, they're shifting from calling it the Black Brown Power Coalition to the Movement Institute. So it's even grown beyond what we had originally envisioned. And they're going to do a presentation on that on Thursday, a commercial, at 9 o'clock or 9:30 on Thursday. But that's an example of using power and position. We all have voice in here, and let me be clear. When Ana Marie talked about murdering the spirit, y'all, I know, trust me when I say I know. When you push these things in your institution and they push back and you do it for years upon years, that is soul sapping. Like, I know. And I know when you go to your board meetings and you have folk who vote against it or debate it and the like, and you're like, why can't we all just get along and understand this is a good thing to do? And it doesn't happen as easily. It is hard. But nonetheless, there is power in these positions that we have in philanthropy. And if we don't use them on our behalf, then who's going to do it? Not a soul. So make sure we use power and position. So holla, instigate, and power.
All right. Thank you, Sharice. Don.
Terrific. Well, as I was sitting here, I was like, what acronym can I come up with? Because I totally agree. I think, you know, we need to use our voices. We need to instigate. We need to think about power and use it. And I think those are absolutely necessary. When I think about the work that we've done, I look at I've been staring at the screen here. It says, Our People, Our Story. And I think one of the most important things that we as foundations need to do is recognize that people are part of the equation in the work that we do. So much of the energy of foundations is focused on transactions, on widgets, on just like tracking metrics and things like that. We lose sight of the people in communities who are really doing the work on the front lines. We also lose track of the people who are working in nonprofits and in communities, and we don't think enough about their well-being. And so what we've really tried to do is to take a people-centered approach to pandemic response, the racial reckoning, and that has really been instilled in the foundation since. So a couple examples, and these are subtle things, but we've started to talk about them. One thing is that we, in increasing our spending by a big amount, 35% or so, we have set aside a bunch of money for community of care, what we call community of care grants, which basically enable organizations to provide more time off for their staff, to basically meet their personal needs. And that has been a real game changer for so many organizations. We have also really started to prioritize, we were already doing a tremendous amount of general support. We actually started collecting data and seeing how much of it we do. Right now, 75% of our grant making is general support, which I'm very proud of. Even, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, it was 25%. So it's been a pretty dramatic change. And then the other thing is, foundations are famously fickle. We fluctuate with the times, with different issues, whatever is urgent and hot. And I think if there is one thing I would really add to all of this work that we're doing is to sustain the attention. The work of racial justice, the work of in our communities is it's a perennial. It's not going away. We can't get pulled off into different directions like we normally do. And so I would just encourage everyone to sustain it, grow it, deepen the work, and stick with it for as long as we possibly can for all the years that we're going to be doing this work. So that's what I mean by people-centric, the way we've been doing it. The story part is inspiring to me because it comes out of a challenge of our times. We live in an age of misinformation and disinformation where there's so much poison out in the atmosphere. People who are actively trying to just completely change the story about January 6th or about the pandemic, about so many things. And I feel like we, foundations that care about racial justice, people who care about social justice more broadly, we've been asleep at the wheel. We haven't recognized, we've paid too much attention to doing more earnest research and documentation and trying to really understand the facts and being smug about the facts, how the facts really are on our side. And that matters, but the fact is the battle is being fought on a completely different battlefield, and that is in stories and narrative and the way people think about the world around them. And so I think it's so important for us to tell our stories and to make sure that we don't just allow this whole territory to be ceded to folks who are actively trying to disinform and misinform people in a white supremacy, racist manner. And so to me, that is absolutely critical for the work going forward.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about what Charisse and Don have said, so one thing we've been interrogating at Woods Fund, so similarly, we used to fund at 6%, and we've raised that to 8.5%, and we're looking to increase it even further in the future. I think to the question, we have to flip this notion of who we're fiduciarily responsible to. And if you went to Geo, I'm going to apologize, you're going to hear the same remarks. I'm not fiduciarily responsible to Woods Fund and to a wealth that does not belong to me. I'm fiduciarily responsible to the social justice ecosystem in Chicago, to organizers who do not themselves have a quality of life, who don't have health benefits, who don't have life insurance. I have contributed to too many GoFundMes for people who gave their life for systemic change, right, to pay for their funeral costs, right? So those of us in the room who consider ourselves liberal and progressive funders, what are we doing when we know the people who are fighting for our own civil rights and our own human rights can't even have a dignified funeral, right? Their families are struggling. So I think we really have to ask those of us in the room that are leaders, because I know if you're a program officer, you're like, oh, I can't do anything about that. We have to challenge our trustees to really rethink this notion of fiduciary responsibility. And we also have to really reimagine how we fund organizing and advocacy. I think organizing and advocacy receives less than 2% of funding nationally. That's the sector that's working on systemic change. There is a reason we see what we're seeing in this country right now. The right funds their own sector. The right movement builds. So what Don was saying about narrative change, that's part of movement building. Philanthropy does not fund movement building. So if we want to see sustained racial justice, if we want to see sustained racial equity, if we actually want to see a United States that I think lives up to all of our vision, then we as philanthropic leaders simply have to change the way we're funding and really rethink what it means to fund systemic change.
So speaking of change, change begins at home, right? So thinking about your own organizations, looking internally, how are you changing there, right? We know in the last 2 years there's been a much stronger call for racial equity, not just externally, but internally. And so let's talk about power and privilege. And how do you think about that and act about that differently or not, and how you're moving forward, both with your staff as well as with community. So we're going to go to Don first.
Okay. Well, I want to build on what Michelle said. I think that organizing, building the capacity is so much a part of making relations with your family, with people in your community, with people who you are intimately related to, and helping folks recognize what the critical nature of having a voice in democratic participation. So I think that is the thing that kind of imbues all of the work that we do, and it's what I bring to my personal life as well. I'll talk about two things. First is the Surdna Foundation is a family foundation, and the family's name is Andrus. Surdna is Andrus spelled backwards. And these days there are about 500 family members descended from the founders, and they're numerous. And one thing that we do is we have a number of family philanthropy programs to educate folks and to kind of bring them up to speed on philanthropy and public service. And we've been doing a whole series of programs for 20 years. And there are a couple of programs that involve folks of all ages across the family. One is called the Social Justice Series. And there are other ones that bring people, it's an intergenerational group. And we talk about issues like structural racism and intersectionality and various topics. And the staff does not participate in these. We have a facilitator, but it's an opportunity for them to not only have the connections among themselves, because they're a big giant family, but also to really delve into the set of issues in a way where they can feel comfortable and really dive in and share their stories and be vulnerable and gain a lot. And so that's been a real game changer in terms of helping folks really understand what we do and getting them to appreciate it. And there's a lot of back and forth. As you can imagine, in a big group like that, there's differences of political persuasions and all kinds of things. But it's work that I'm really proud of, because I feel like that's the kind of intimate discourse we need to have about these issues, away from the screaming people on cable television and all that, where you can actually make some progress and help people understand each other. So that's one thing I'll cite. A second thing is I think that, like I said, we really are focusing on narrative change. I have put a lot of my energy, as this is one of my key goals as president of the foundation, on cross-racial solidarity. And I use this metaphor of the American family. It's really rambunctious, it's very fractured, it's all the dysfunctional things that you might expect from any family. But the fact is, we are a people, we are a nation, and I've really tried to emphasize through my work with APIP and other AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander organizations, first of all, really understanding what's going on with AAPI communities and the work on racial justice, and trying to build racial solidarity efforts with folks like in this room and across philanthropy and other sectors. And so that's been a critical approach for us as well.
Michelle. So Woods Fund centered racial equity about 8 and 9 years ago externally, which I think is the trend in philanthropy. We did not center it internally. So our policies and procedures did not reflect it. And what I mean by that, I'm going to share this with you. When I came in 2.5 years ago, the first thing I always do is I look at the policies and procedures of an organization. It tells you a lot about the organization. We gave our staff, and Woods Fund has always historically had a staff of women of color. So if you're a woman and you requested maternity leave, you got 2 weeks off. Because in the state of Illinois, you don't have to give maternity leave. It's actually not required. It's not mandated. It's a best practice, but it's not mandated. So we had the bare minimum of policies. So if you can imagine, if you're a woman of color coming to work at the organization, which we still have a team of all women of color, then what did our policies and procedures say about who you were, your value, et cetera? So we've done a lot of restructuring in the last 2.5 years to ensure that women of color are centered in our practices and in our policies and procedures, in our benefits, women and women identifying individuals, to ensure that hopefully as we continue to move forward that we are as equitable as we can be. We've also really, and I've worked hard, I was raised career-wise to be very policy-driven and stick with the policy. And my staff has really challenged me to flip that and instead center humanity. right? Because policies don't always center one's humanity and doesn't always center one's experiences and what's going on. It's more about the work and more about protecting the organization. And so we've been doing a lot of hard cultural work at the organization to understand what does it mean to center staff, what does it mean to protect staff. I think sometimes I come from nonprofit, from fundraising. This is the first time I have the resources to create a workplace that actually is framed with abundance for my team. And so that's kind of the mindset that we're using at Woods Fund to hopefully continue to center racial equity and racial justice.
And similarly, we've done a scrub of our policies. We've paid attention to how we function externally and the like. We also just recently, and this may be like, that's not the way to answer the question, but it does relate. We also do quite a bit of partnerships around this. And so this past Friday, we actually voted on a grant to HIP for the Power Building and Justice Fund, which will, for us in Arkansas, it brings in capacity. It'll bring in the opportunity for us to leverage resources that aren't there. It'll bring in expertise that's not there. And so that partnership and building those partnerships externally and bringing in talent is just as important to capacity building around equity than anything else is. And then the other point other thing I want to say, and it's only because I just want to say it because I wouldn't be authentic to myself if I didn't. At this point, if you're not centering humanity, if you haven't looked at your policies and the like, then that means you don't want to. Like, this work is a choice, and it's not hard. You either do it or you don't. And when you do it, there are a set of there's a pedagogy, there are, things that need to be done, looked at, there is an approach and the like, all of that is true. But it's still, bottom line, a choice. Do you want to change that institution to be of service to equity and justice, or don't you? And then act accordingly. Because we have a lot of folk in our field who are making the words and saying the words, but their grant making doesn't reflect it when you look at the grants list, or their behavior doesn't reflect it. There are way too many. I saw Lori Villarosa in here. Like, we got so much stuff. We have we got Center for Effective Leadership. Them too. Center for Effective Philanthropy. We have AppFi. There's so many tools and resources out here. This is really about choice at this point. So when I hear questions about what do we need to do and how do we need to go about it, I don't know. Because you either choose to do it or you choose not to.
And if I can add to this mix, one thing that I do is I'm part of many tables. I'm sure many of us are at tables where we talk about the work that we do with peers. And so there are a bunch of CEO tables where we talk about the management challenges that we've had over the last few years. And one thing that has become very apparent to us is that this period of COVID and the racial reckoning the last few years have been some of the most difficult management years. It's a massive management challenge. And so I think one thing that many of us have learned, and I'll just speak for myself at the moment, is there is a tremendous frequency and incidence of burnout, people feeling overworked, and just the monotony of being at home all the time, which makes it wonderful to be here in person, in a room with a bunch of wonderful fellow travelers. But the burnout is real, and so putting people at the center of our work, really centering everyone's humanity, really needs to take into that into account. We've done things like basically close the office for a week here and there, because during the pandemic it's hard to take vacation, especially if you can't go anywhere during the early days. And so shutting down the whole foundation for a week so that everyone is off email, everyone's off Slack, has been really terrific. And other moves like that, I think, have been really a difference maker in the work that we're doing.
Good. So we're going to have time for one or two more questions, and we're going to open it up to the audience. So if you want to ask a question, please make sure to fill out a card. So we're here at the HIP conference. So talk to us a little bit about, and we'll start with you, Cherie, since you brought up Black-Brown coalitions, and how is it that in your organization as a sector, how do we
more and more try to promote that and cultivate those types of partnerships.
You just got to do it. I don't know. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a horrible panelist today. There's just something for me. Just put your toe in there and do it. You may stumble and fall. When Don and Michelle was speaking earlier, like, why don't we do this work? So many people don't. Their reputational capital, so many are fearful of the, what if we do support movement building? I've been in conversations where folk are like, well, what if they pick at us? I'm like, what if they do? And I understand on boards, sometimes these are people's friends that we are building movements against, right? Who sit on these boards. And you have fellow board members who don't support because you're, taking action or supporting something that may jeopardize or challenge their friends. All of that is real. But again, that is, again, about choice because, I don't know a how-to. Like, I can write one, I'm sure, because I got enough intelligence and enough whatever to write one. But really, you just got to do it. And if you're not willing to just fumble, stumble, make a mistake, talk to folk, and just do it, then you're never going to get anywhere. And one of the frustrations I have, especially around this conversation on equity, are folks who are still defining it and talking about it. And while you're defining and talking about it, people still don't have no money. Like, I don't get it. And I do get it because you're trying to get the board on board and your staff and others on board and want everything perfect before you take that leap. But sometimes you got to take that leap and then others just got to come later because while you doing all that, people don't have no money. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So how about you? Maybe, I don't know, that's it.
I heard just do it, I've heard that before.
Well, I also believe in just do it, so here we are in the NICAD. But I would say two things. Number one, I was really struck by Anna Mari's comments in the beginning where you talked about how, Latinx folks are, big numbers in the U.S. and our voices really need to match the numbers and the political power needs to match the numbers. And the undercount is 3 times that it was in 2010. That's mind-blowingly terrible and we got to improve on that. So, a little bit advertisement for the Census Equity Initiative. That is an effort that is, has been very effective in making sure that people of color are counted in the U.S., counted more effectively. We've got to make sure that that undercounts don't occur again, and they're gearing up for 2030. So just when you thought there's a little lapse, there's actually a lot of work to be done. So that's one thing. Second thing I'll say is that, Sharice is totally right. Like, you just got to do it. And for me, the cross-racial solidarity work is so important, and it actually takes a lot of work. Just to cite one example, Black-Asian relations in a lot of cities and a lot of states around the country are strained, and there are real issues to work through. It takes work to bring community leaders together, talk about commonalities, common interests, differences to work out. Out of my discretionary pot, I gave a grant to the California Black Freedom Fund, which I believe is so important. And there are many examples like that where we were just basically putting our money where our mouths are. It's easy enough to talk about cross-racial solidarity. It's another thing to really do the work and to make progress so that you can forge partnerships that build political power.
Yeah, I think in all of our cities and states, coalition exists. Right? So if your ear is on the ground, if you are connected with grantees, you will become aware of the coalitions that are working towards racial equity, racial justice, equitable legislation in your cities and states. So funding them, right? Unrestricted funding, no applications. I'll give an example. We have a Catalyst Fund, which is all geared towards funding coalitions in the city of Chicago. You're not going to see a win for years. So part of it is also the education of your trustees. So we had several incredible legislative wins this past January, a year ago in January in Chicago. It took 10, 15, 20 years for those legislative wins to come about. And that's not it. So I think a lot of times we get into this notion of, oh, that's it, the work is done. Actually, the real work comes in implementation, right? Because we've seen so many wonderful legislative, like in Chicago, the cannabis was a big deal. I can tell you, I cuss a lot. I can tell you it's been a crap show in terms of implementation in the state of Illinois, right? So the real work and the real funding need comes with implementation. So if I could, I would high five Sharice, because it is just about do it. It is not about perfect. We funded a movement building fund at the height of the pandemic, and it was to fund a collective of 12 organizations, and it was literally for them, it was $500,000 over 2 years. It's the largest grant out of the Woods Fund, and it was literally for them just to figure stuff out, to relationship build, to talk. And I think when we fund, and often when we fund movement building, organizing, we want to see something. But we don't give those individuals the time and the space just to R&D, research and develop, meet, talk, take a retreat, build their own relationship and their own ties so that they're stronger for the long haul. And that was a huge experiment. We had no metrics in place. We had nothing. My board was like, what are we doing? We really had very little in place. We just knew, like, look, if these organizations had the time and the money to be able to build their relationship, what would that look like? And so that was a huge experiment of ours that actually is now paying off. And so I agree with Dawn and Sharice. It's really just about jumping in, trying something, experimenting, being deeply comfortable with the uncomfortableness of it all and the messiness of it all, and getting your board there as well.
Great. So we're going to now start to transition to questions. I'm not sure if they're going to bring them or I just call people out. I'm not seeing anyone. As they figure that out, I'm going to ask a quick, I'll just summarize something because I think the question is going to come up here. So one of the things I think we want to make sure we heard is just do it, right? So Nike should be sponsoring this conference. We should also be centering humanity. That was, I thought, a really important thing you heard across. And the importance of narratives, the importance of stories, right? You don't remember what people say, you remember how they make you feel. And that's in stories. All right. Philanthropy loves logic models and theories of change and action. How have you reimagined the effectiveness and who determines impact? Who wants to take a crack at that one?
So we have a theory of change and a logic model, and we do our best to, there's a way in which through storytelling that we talk about our impact at the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. That also needs a remix, right? It needs a remix in the sense of, you got to have some theory, what direction you're going in, how is this going to work. I think that's reasonable. That's even reasonable for grant seekers in addition to internal functioning and your board and the like. How we determine or look at impact, that one, again, I've been in philanthropy over 25 years, and that one is still not quite answered. And, and it needs to be answered and the like, but what form does it truly need to take? And for us, we landed on storytelling and narrative and talking about our impact in that way. We do provide some numbers, but really it's through storytelling and narrative that we package and talk about our impact to one another and externally. So that again is an approach. But I also want to say that's also an inhibitor and an excuse for not doing what we need to be doing, is getting, again, caught up on the logic models, the research, the impact, and the like, because I've seen that many times in philanthropy, even at one of the institutions I had worked at, is, you can stay stuck there and never move to action. And let's just make sure in the power of our positions, we don't stay stuck there, but we also move to some action.
When I entered philanthropy, I was really struck by all the jargon, and I felt really lost, because there were, logic models and theories of change, and I didn't know what any of those things were. But, when it became demystified to me, it occurred to me that it's just really, you got to just explain how change is going to happen. And if you put it in those terms and you really try to use your explanation for how you think change is going to happen, and bring people along with it, share the vision, you know, generate excitement. That's the name of the game. And so I see that as being something that we should all just remember. What we're trying to do is actually pretty simple. It doesn't have to be overly complicated in technical jargon. So that's my constant reminder to myself and to my friends and colleagues. In terms of measuring, you know, metrics, evaluating all those things, since I came on board, Cerna has taken a different approach. Some may refer to it loosely as equitable evaluation, but the basic idea, and there are many different, you know, types of jargon associated with it, but the basic idea is, how can we do things that are meaningful and produce outcomes that other folks will appreciate and really understand well? And so the way we did our evaluation work is to work with a whole bunch of grantee partners, with other funders, with people in the field, in communities, to really understand what's important to them. What are the things that they would like to see along with us? So collectively, you know, what are the things that are most meaningful to track? And then we can devote resources to like collecting data and, you know, hiring a consultant to analyze it and all that. And so by the time, you know, all the data are collected and everything's analyzed, you can actually produce something that is useful to the field, useful and meaningful to people who are out there trying to make a difference on the front lines. And so that's been our approach, and we've published our journey in doing that on our website. If you look on our website, you'll see the different stages in different programs of how we're doing it. Part of it is just, you know, bringing people together and designing what the whole evaluation process is going to look like, and then reporting out on preliminary results. And I think this is an exciting field because it's also a field where there's just not a lot of prior evidence. There's tons of stories, and we need to produce more stories, but I think the jury is still out in terms of giving lots of folks the confidence to take on more of a community-oriented, a people-oriented evaluation process.
We're in the middle of all this stuff right now, and it makes my brain hurt. We are trying to figure out our evaluation and what we're going to measure. I think what we're looking at is the determinants of movement building, which is community change, narrative cultural change, institutional change, and systemic change, and trying to really understand where our grantee partners fall in those four containers so we get a real picture of the landscape in Chicago. And if, for example, one container, maybe we don't have that many grantee partners, what will it take to get more to move or to fund more so we really have a robust system in Chicago? So we're considering that model to evaluate. We also are more interested about our impact on the sector versus the individual impacts that our grantee partners are having. So part of our strategic plan is we're trying to figure out a way where our grantee partners will actually rate the foundation and do a performance review on the foundation, and for us to sort of publish that report card, if you will, as part of our journey so that we're understanding what our impact has been, whether we're bringing value or harm to the sector, and how we can continue to improve.
Right. So I've gotten a lot of great questions. Unfortunately, we have time for just one more question. And so I'm going to ask the panelists if you can be relatively brief on this. How does philanthropy maintain the momentum coming out of 2020 in the face of social whitelash against racial justice?
Can you repeat that again?
How do we deal with the white lash against racial justice?
That's how we do it.
Who wants to go first?
Here's the thing. The white lash is always going to be there, right? I was at the GEO conference, and a couple of, I'm just going to name it, white participants were a little disgruntled and said, how come people keep talking about race? Thank you for the laughter in the corner. Because that's what I did, because race is always talked about, right? It's constantly in the room, whether you are invoking black, brown, Asian, it's in the room, right? So this white lash, when I see it, is a discomfort on the behalf of white people in losing their power and losing their proximity to power. And so what I don't want is that for those of us in the room that lead foundations, that we take that white lash, and we're already seeing it in Chicago. We're starting to see a pullback in Chicago. We're starting to see a challenging of woke language. We're starting to see a watering down, if you will, And it's because I think people are responding to the white lash to make white colleagues comfortable. I'm just going to say I'm not interested in that.
I'll just briefly say, don't cede ground. We shouldn't give up on progress that's been made. Number 2, sustain and grow. And number 3, let's all talk and let's build cross-racial solidarity, but let's engage with each other to make progress.
And I just want to point out that Arkansas is 74% white. And so it's life. Holla, instigate, and power in position. Holla, instigate, power in position. And make sure we get in positions on boards. Make sure we hire one another. Make sure we fund one another. Like, it starts here. And we just have to keep building.
All right, we're going to go ahead and close out. I want to give our panelists the last word of a minute to share a pearl of wisdom, starting with Michelle.
Oh, God. Just like Charisse doesn't like the Google, I hate these questions. Can you circle back to me, Frank?
All right, you can use yours, done.
Okay, well, you know, I was going to use the hip-on-hip thing that Charisse offered, which I totally think is the right way to go. But what I would say is, you know, for this community, it's so meaningful because, you know, HIP is a coalition unto itself. So many of us in America are coalitions, like AAPIs, like Asia and the Pacific Islands, it's like half the planet, you know, physically. So, you know, we're all coalitions. We already struggle to try to figure out how to build the commonalities and the linkages among us. And so let's extend that to this broader family of concern, and let's do this.
No, you can go already. I do have something, but I can go after you.
So one, I want to put in another shameless plug for Thursday, Representation Matters, Black and Brown Power Building as a Strategy for Change, Thursday at 9, where you'll hear more about the work that we were doing in Arkansas with some brilliant leaders who were just wonderful. And my last words are hip on hip.
All right.
Fund organizations led by people of color to win.
Well, I just want to thank our panelists for spending a very quick hour with us in terms of just hearing again about some of the things going on, and hopefully you found it as enlightening and hip as I did. So, 2000 Late, that was one I hadn't heard in a while. That was great. So, join me in thanking our panelists.
And now, to present our HIP Giver Award, please welcome to the stage HIP Board Chair Efrain Escobedo, HIP President and CEO Ana Maria Galagos, and HIP Board Member Raul Moas.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. I see everybody had their cafecito and is excited to keep going today. My name is Raul Moas. As a native son of Miami, as a proud member of the Cuban diaspora, and as a member of the board of HIP, it is such a joy and privilege to welcome you to the 305, which today is very sunny. We brought out the sun just for HIP, so thank you all for making the trek over. It is a pleasure to welcome you here. Today I have a distinct personal privilege, in addition to professional kind of responsibility here, but a personal privilege and joy in awarding one of this year's HIP Giver Awards. The HIP Giver Award is meant to recognize exceptional service, dedication, and contributions to community, to humanity, particularly to the Latino communities in our country. And today I have just a great task of presenting that award to my dear friend and just overall human extraordinaire, Melissa Medina Jimenez, and come on over, come on. And the Medina Family Foundation. I also find it incredibly awesome to really embarrass people. So let me tell you a little bit. I've been told to be brief, and I'm Cuban, so I just talk and talk. Melissa is a force of nature. She is an incredible human, an amazing mom. In addition to being a terrific philanthropist and uplifting Miami, building a more just Miami, particularly for children, the children of the city, Melissa and her family have dedicated the past decade, I think we're getting to a decade now, to building up Miami's tech community. And the reason that's so important in this context is, as you know, Miami is a majority minority city. It's also 70% Latino of all kind of diasporas. When folks talk about Latino entrepreneurship and supporting Latino entrepreneurs, they hardly ever include technology in that conversation. Latinos and technology don't always go hand in hand. Latinos and entrepreneurship in high tech don't always come together. Her family, and her in particular, have done a tremendous service, and our community is incredibly indebted to her. Not only by putting Miami on the map when it comes to technology, startups, innovation, but putting Latinos in Miami and normalizing Latinos in technology in the fastest growing sector, one of the highest paying sectors in the economy, and saying it is not a token, it is not a quota to be met, it is not a fetishized exotic thing to be in Miami and be in a room that is majority Latino in tech. Rather, it is what America will look like, not too short order from now. It is what Miami looks like today. And so for all your years of service and contribution to Miami, to the Latino community here and elsewhere, we are so, so, so delighted that you accept this and we're honored here today with us.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll be very brief. This means a lot to me. First and foremost, to be presented by Raul, dear friend and staunch supporter of all the Medina family crazy ideas. He's always there, so thank you, Raul. Thank you, Ana Mari. Thank you, HIP. We're extremely humbled and honored to accept this on behalf of myself and my family. We're very passionate about empowering youth, empowering founders, specifically minority founders, empowering women, but most passionate as a Latina of empowering Latino and Latina leaders. And so I'm just very grateful, honored, humbled. Thank you again. Thank you for the amazing work that HIP does. And hopefully we could continue to build on our foundation and collaborate more together in the future. I think very inspired by the panel before us. I'll end paraphrasing, I think Michelle in the panel before said something about, you need a mindset with a framework of abundance, and that really kind of filtered, and I think if we all leave here thinking that, we could do a lot of amazing work together. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome back Brenda Vaden. Please.
All right. Felicidades, Melissa. Thank you for joining us. So I have a very special partnership announcement that we are super happy to be able to announce here at our conference. We'd like to take this moment to celebrate our new partnership between Welcome Technologies, el Instituto de los Mexicanos en el Exterior, and HIP. This partnership aims to elevate the importance of social investment in Mexican communities abroad. This memorandum of understanding will allow us to make grants to nonprofit organizations that support Mexican communities in the US. It's also a direct challenge to the systemic inequities that our communities face from health, education, financial inclusion, economic development, sports, gender equality, indigenous peoples, civic participation and engagement in programs for children and youth. Partnering with the Instituto de los Mexicanos en el Exterior, it's challenging my Spanish, and Welcome Technologies, we will be able to support Mexican grassroots organizations working directly to attend the needs of our Mexicanos in the United States. So please help me welcome the representatives from each group who are joining us today for a few words. Ingeniero Luis Gutiérrez Reyes, director del Instituto de los Mexicanos en el Exterior. Ingeniero Raúl Lomelí, co-founder, chairman, and chief community officer de Welcome Technologies. Bravo. And our very own Ana Mari Argilagos, presidenta y CEO de Hispanics in Philanthropy. Yay.
Muy buenas tardes. Es un gran honor estar aquí en este magnífico evento. You know, as communities, we fight to be, because we're underrepresented, but worst, misrepresented, right? And then we're trying to ensure that we actually gain access. We're underserved, but what's worst, purposely ignored, right? And then when they need us, they come up with fancy words to say that we deemed essential workers, but really they're just trying to say that we're disposable because there's no public policy in it. And I think that's what leads us to today. Big fan of both my friends here, of what we're trying to create. We're going to create this fund to ensure that we're not underrepresented, that we're not misrepresented, and that we gain access to those organizations at the local level, as you've so well have placed it, Luis, to ensure that those funds are there, not only to serve, of course, Mexican communities, but also our brothers and sisters throughout the Americas, which is what the Mexican government has been doing for a long time. So with that, what a pleasure to be here.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias, Anne-Marie. Gracias, Raúl. First, we met a year ago, and we started talking how we want to help our community here in the States. Here we have 12 million Mexican migrants, first-generation Mexican migrants in the States, and we have close to 28 more Mexican origins here in the States. We are the big Hispanic, on the Hispanic community, we are the big, from Mexicans, we are like 38 Mexicans here, but we are focused on the undocumented migrants. We are talking about 6 or 7 million people here in the States. We deploy several programs in our consulates. We have 50 consulates in the States. We will open 2 more this year in New Jersey and Oklahoma. And we have these programs in health, education, financial education, financial service, sports, culture. And we are focused on how we help these undocumented people to get access for health services because they are undocumented, they don't have access, and how we push our younger generation to have access to higher education. So when we talk about it, they say, let's do something together. Let's have this agreement, and we are here to learn from you how to get some funds. And right now, we are starting this new fund. We're pushing some resources. We expect it to have more and give access. So we help a lot of people. We hope could help more Mexicans and other Hispanics, most of us Central American people here in the States. Thank you.
You keep hearing this. It was a year ago, and it was a year ago, and it was a dream. And we said, esto lo podemos hacer. How do we do it? It was our dream. And it's really historic. This is, for HIP, our first donor-directed giving fund. And with Raul, we have a partner, and we're incredibly grateful because it's going to be $500,000 over 5 years. That's a lot of money for our Mexican diaspora communities, and it's huge. And I feel like we need to have a round of applause here for this bravery and this courageousness and this generosity. So over the next 5 years, we have this fund. The fund is starting with this $500,000. It's over 5 years. We're looking for partners to invest in this fund because that's the starting point, but we want it to be a lot bigger. ¿Cuántos son? ¿12 millones? 12 millones. So we want at least $12 million in this fund. So help us get the news out there that we're doing this. It's part of our philanthropic practice work that we are launching at HIP, where we're working with donors and working with community. And so we're excited to be partnering with Licenciado, with IME, the Instituto de Mexicanos en el Exterior, and to working with all of the diaspora community across all of the US to get more money into their hands and to do fantastic things. So with that, we'll be signing, and we're excited to have you witnessing this wonderful, beautiful day. And, a ver, a firmar. A firmar. Gracias.
Aquí se firman todos.